2, 1.
Hello, everyone. This is the third session of TAICHI Cross DIS, and we are now very happy to have three excellent design researchers here. The title today is discussing the hybrid future of HCI from a designer researcher perspective. This is the third session of TAICHI Cross DIS, and we are happy to have three excellent design researchers here. The title today is discussing the hybrid future of HCI. Sorry, I had to shut down my YouTube. Okay, I hope everything fine now.
Yeah, but you need to share your screen right now.
Okay, sorry.
No worries.
Okay, let's come back. So we are very happy to have Todd here and Mei Jun, also Will Odom. So now let's begin today's session. First, I would like to invite Todd as the first speaker to present his research. So now would you share your screen, Todd?
Sure.
Yeah, great.
Is that fine? Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ronghui, and thank you for the organization for inviting me. Before I start sharing my research, I was also told to share a bit about myself. And I think that's really important because I think we need to understand someone's research and also someone's opinion about what's happening in terms of design and approaches. You also need to understand a little bit about the person because that's how we view the world and what we think is important. And so just trying to get to my next screen. So I was designed in Malaysia, but I was exported to Australia at a very young age. And that had a number of consequences. So because of that, I was forced to be very independent from a very young age. I had to be very self-reliant. I had to teach myself all sorts of things from English to cooking and doing my laundry and looking after myself as well as studying. But also, which means that I can't speak Chinese fluently and I can't read or write Chinese. I'm much more an English educated person as a result of that. More importantly, I have lived as an other from a very young age. So I've always felt to be in the margin and different. And so I think that lived experience is really important in also guiding what I ended up doing in terms of my research. I understand quite acutely how it feels to be different, even though I'm a male. But I lived in, and I continue to live in Australia, where people judge me based on exactly what I look before I even speak. And when I do speak, people are surprised that I speak reasonably good English. So I know the feeling of being different. I know the feeling of being marginalized. I've also been expected by my family who exported me here to succeed at all cost. As a person, I found that I was very interested in all kinds of things. And I was quite good in all kinds of things. And so I started off in actually in the world of science, in understanding bacteria, to understanding zoology, botany. I was really interested in that and ended up in immunology. I also have training in music. I also trained as a high school teacher, as well as design before I finally ended up doing a PhD in human-computer interaction. All in all, one of the things that I really hated when I was young, it's when I was told that I was the jack of all trades and master of none. I felt that that was actually a put down, saying that, you know, you're good at all sorts of things, but you're not good at any particular thing. Now I look at it to be actually a plus and a positive because when I'm doing human-computer interaction and doing design research, I find that I can bring all sorts of perspective together in my work. And when I finished my PhD, when I was doing my PhD, I became really, I came to a realization about how much of our daily experiences are mutually shaped by digital technologies. It became really obvious to me that our everyday experiences would not be the way it is without all the digital technologies around us and how they mediate our world. I also came to a deeper understanding about our relational sense-making, and I learned how to probe experiences. And I ended up learning how to and exploring how to intervene to support deeper and richer and more personally meaningful experiences when we design digital technology. So that's become quite a bit of a stance. And in my postdoctoral world in Denmark and later on in Newcastle, UK, I picked up participatory design. I learned more about democratic, emancipatory, and designing with people rather than designing for people, empowering, mutual learning. But I also got into understanding better about inclusion and exclusion, the blurring of boundaries of communities, and how we really need to look at communities more than just people, but actually what make that community. So there's a shift from an individual to societal in terms of my research lens. So quickly, some of the images across the over 10 years of research that I've done, I think when I have to summarize what I am researching, I think primarily it's really around experiences with and through technology. My work is around, some of them is around understanding the different type of experiences, but I'm much more interested in deeper, richer, more personally meaningful experiences. And then to support them through design, interventions. But I'm also very drawn towards working with methods, understanding how we can best design with and using different methods to be more successful in our design, especially decolonizing methodologies, which is something that I've come to in my more recent years when working with Indigenous Australians and trying to design with a marginalized and vulnerable community. And finally, I'm also very keen in developing tools to think with when we design. And I've worked with Rong Hui and others in developing something what we call an experiential persona, where we look at people in a much less reductive and richer way of looking at people. Understanding how we can use narratives and design probes. And finally, I think I have come to a realization that my students and myself, and maybe that's why they come to me, is because we are all interested in designing for more vulnerable, more marginalized, those who are not, doesn't have a strong voice in society. So these are some of the groups that I work with in my design research for the past few years now. So I think that's enough about me and enough about my research. Thank you.
Tak, thank you very much. And now, so we go ahead to Mei-Jin. So would you share your screen?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so actually I have lived in Malaysia for 5 years when I was a child. So I also felt the feeling that the sense of other when I was there. So good morning and good evening. My name is Mei-Jin Liu. Thanks to the organizers at TAICHI. It's a great pleasure to be here to introduce myself and share my thoughts with you. Okay. So this is the timeline of my professional experience. It has been a long journey since I received my bachelor's degree in 1996. I did my undergraduate studies in industrial design at NCKU in Taiwan and master's degree also in industrial design at the University of Alberta in Canada. I worked at Gigabyte Technology for about 3 years. During that time, most of my designs were IT products. I was a visiting designer in 2004 at Design Affairs in Munich, Germany. The design company is a spin-off from Siemens Mobile, and therefore we work on cell phone products as well as other electronic devices. I joined iPevel in 2005, and at its Taipei office, I was responsible to lead a design team to develop products, including Skype phones and other internet-related products. I founded my own company, Vogtland Design, in 2010. We provided design services and also sold some of the designs under our brand. I became an assistant professor, later associate professor at Asia University in Taiwan. I served as the department chair of Creative Product Design Department and executive secretary of International Design Program. Currently, I'm a PhD candidate in design at NC State and a visiting associate professor at NCKU in Tainan, Taiwan. Next year, I'll join the industrial design program at the University of Washington in Seattle. Well, I have participated in many design projects in my career, designing IT products, craft products, and some biomedical devices. For example, I work on design projects of EEG helmet and intraocular pressure monitoring system, which were collaborative research projects between Asia University and China Medical University. For my current research, you can see from the graph that my research is related to systemic design, interactive design, behavior design, adaptive design, and also agent-based approach. When I was in the States, I participated in a pediatric complex care design project, which was a joint project between NCSU and Duke University. It adopts a human-centered design approach to create better experiences for the pediatric patients and care providers. Right now, my research focuses on understanding how adaptive design takes effect in a complex system. So adaptive design is a user adaptive system that can adapt its behavior to its users and environment, even after a design is deployed. And it can be seen as a participatory design approach. So I think it resonates with what Tak-Wah just said, to design with the users and not just for the users. The concept of adaptive design is based on developing partnership between the designer, user, and hybrid agents, which comprise both human and non-human agents. The purpose of design intervention is to allow hybrid agents to interact with each other and promote adaptivity of the system through design artifacts. So the concept of distributed cognition actually moves the boundary of the unit of cognitive analysis to include the material world. So such a viewpoint allows us to identify hybrid agents based on the boundaries of the units of shared cognitive process instead of the physical boundaries. Therefore, the capability of artifacts can be used to improve the situation awareness of agents in a distributed situation awareness scheme. I use agent-based models to simulate the interactions between hybrid agents in order to study how local interactions can generate emergent behaviors that eventually lead to system adaptivity. So, for example, In this model, each of these dots represents an agent that wants to associate with other agents based on their similarity. They like to link with other similar agents according to the principle of homophily and can assimilate other agents by changing others' properties to their own. Assimilation in this model resembles the social influence. So the higher the assimilation rate is, the higher the social influences are. By adjusting the parameters of the model, the network topology can become more distributed or more decentralized. It means that, for example, in the case of service design, the designer can make a decision about how the touch points in the service network should be arranged and distributed. To give you an example of the adaptive design system, first, a visitor arrived at a museum and chooses an interest-based self-guided tour. She completes an interest assessment and installs a tour guide app on her phone. She uses phone to listen to the recorded narrations. The app displays recommendations for the next art pieces to visit. After visiting, she provides feedback about her experience to the system. So we can use the situation awareness model to understand how design takes part in the system. During her visit, she has her goal and intention in mind, and the artifacts provide information to guide her actions. At the end of the tour, her experience feeds back to the system, and which allow the system to adapt to the changes generated by the visitors. So I have written down some responses to the questions for panel discussion, which may come in handy in the later session. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Meijun. It's very, very good. So next we will invite Will Odom to present his research. So Odom, please share your screen.
Sure. And thank you so much to all of the organizers of this great event. I think it's so fantastic to be able to kind of connect across like boundaries, even the circumstances we're living in, and to kind of really form like relationships and hopefully like partnerships for the future for design research. So this is really exciting. And so in terms of my background, maybe I'll just give a really quick synopsis, which is that I have a background in, is kind of started with computer science and ethnomusicology. And so having like a kind of grounding in humanities and technical work. And then I moved into doing a master's in interaction design. I actually also did a fellowship that kind of connects from some of the work that we just saw presented through the Fulbright Foundation, and actually in Australia at the Queensland College of Art in Brisbane. And I did a PhD at Carnegie Mellon in the Human Computer Interaction Institute. And I've been living and working and just generally having like a great time at Simon Fraser University in the School of Interactive Arts and Technology. Our school, I'll talk a little bit about it, but it's quite kind of interdisciplinary, but there is a large kind of interest in design research. And maybe I'll just kind of give you a little bit more of like an idea of what we do and focus in on one project. And I'm really excited to open up for the panel discussion. So we are located in Vancouver, British Columbia. And I think that like a real goal here is to kind of extend like an invitation for anyone that's interested that might want to kind of work with us, and to also kind of acknowledge that our work takes place on the unceded territories of the Squamish, Salish, and Stolo, and many other First Nations communities. And there is actually, just kind of picking up on some of the threads from Tuck's project and discussions, there's a large interest in kind of a decolonizing lens as well within our work. So I've had the great pleasure for the last 5.5 years to kind of co-direct the Everyday Design Studio with Professor Ron Wakari. within our department at SFU. It's really great. It's comprised of a fantastic set of PhD and master's students, and even sometimes undergrads. And we really work together to kind of think about the kind of the changing nature of interaction design and design research, and how we might kind of adapt with it and kind of push it ahead in relation to many issues that are kind of pressing us today. Another thing to mention, just kind of where we're working in, where we're coming from. It's a very exciting time. We are also kind of extending out within an adjacent lab called the Homeware Lab, which has dedicated support for digital fabrication, electronics prototyping, documentation, and really kind of the making and kind of study of things. And currently we're really interested in working with emerging researchers. So if there's any people that are aspiring to do masters or kind of PhD degrees, feel free to please get in touch. It's a really exciting time as we kind of extend our capabilities. One of the things we're really interested in is the making of things in and of itself as a form of research, and also thinking about how that connects to both kind of human and non-human experience. And I'll just kind of click through just to kind of give you an idea of what some of the projects that we make kind of look like. Without getting into too much detail of what each of these are, we're really interested in the making of things, not just to kind of evaluate them in terms of how people might like them or not, but really what they're situated in kind of longer term experiences are with them. And so we're really kind of attend to like the materiality of things, like computational, like things that may kind of live within our everyday lives that, you know, humans, people might interact with, but also have a strong relation to other things and environments over time. And so we're really interested in these kind of like themes and these threads. And so today, I just wanted to talk about one kind of main thread within our work called slow interaction design, and kind of think about what this concept means, especially in relation to some of the provocations for the panel, and also thinking about research through design and design research and how this kind of fits within it. So in order to kind of like understand this concept, I'm going to give a bit of like an overview of one project that maybe kind of, you know, as designers and design researchers really think through, like exemplars and kind of things and the making of things. And so I just want to kind of talk through one and kind of give you a bit of a framing of where we're kind of coming from with this. So this project is called Ollie, and it's kind of based around music and kind of personal data. And so we know that music has been something that, you know, has traditionally been kind of this very material thing within our lives. It's important for supporting people's practices of self-reflection and connection. As this photo illustrates, you know, it's something that we like would consume and like listen to, but also kind of live with and have this very strong kind of embodied presence like around us. But we know we increasingly live in a world that's mediated by technology, and a lot of our music listening experiences often kind of look like this now. And that is a very cool thing. There's nothing like wrong with that. That's really great. Kind of social cloud computing, mobile technologies have created a world that's allowed us to have personal archives of digital kind of music at scales larger, and really rates faster than ever before in human history. So just thinking about it, there's trillions of songs that are streamed per year. There's these massive histories that are kind of produced as a byproduct of that. They're very much personal. They're very much kind of tied to what we've listened to in the past. And so that opens up some really interesting opportunities. But it also kind of creates some consequences or trade-offs, right? So there's this kind of lack of physical presence, or largely a lack of physicality for casual engagements with our music listening and music listening histories. Often these kind of more discovery-driven music services do not support really like looking back on the past, but more trying to find something new. And also as we move towards the cloud, it's harder to even know like where our stuff like resides or what it is. Also, as we look towards the future and we start to think about our histories, it really starts to raise this question of what kind of future are we designing? How will we even know, you know, what our histories are as they become digital? And also as designers, we know that it's really important to create things that we have a longer lasting kind of relationship to. So that starts to pose these really interesting questions for design. around how might we kind of engage with personal data when it's at a size and scale that we've never encountered before, or how can we even design longer term like relations to technologies or kind of data within our everyday lives, and how should we even approach these questions? And so in light of these questions, within our group, we're really interested in research through design because there's not going to be a single answer to them. These questions are very much kind of bound up within the future. And so research through design is very interested in creating design artifacts as a way of constructing knowledge, but also as a way of asking questions around what might be a potential future that we might be interested in, and what could or should be the future, and involving kind of participation in these types of questions. And so for our work, we've really migrated towards the kind of slow technology as a framing. And if you're not familiar with slow technology, it's a design philosophy that argues for creating technology that surrounds us and is part of our lives over long periods of time. So creating things that become very much situated within our lives and open up possibilities for kind of long-term relationships. Okay, so that kind of brings us to the OLLI project. And so this is one example of a project that's investigating these kind of larger questions through a slow technology framing. And so essentially OLLI is a music listening device that selects music from your past and then opens up an opportunity for you to engage with that if you'd like to. One important thing in understanding how OLLI works is that we built it based on using the Last.fm service. And so if you're not familiar with what Last.fm is, essentially it's just a metadata collecting service. So every time you listen to a song, whether it's on iTunes or Naver or Spotify or any kind of digital platform, even YouTube, it just creates a very precise like record of that. And so that's it. And so what's really interesting is that Last.fm has been around for almost 18 years now. And so there's this huge long-term history of people's music listening practices. And so the way that OLLI works, just with that kind of in mind, is that it will randomly select a song that you've listened to in your past. And when it starts to do that, it doesn't actually start to play it, but what it starts to do is to rotate this internal disk. And so here I'll just kind of move to a slide that maybe you can see. So here you see two different OLLIs that have different rotational speeds. And so the slower one is indicating that that song that it's selecting is from a deeper time in your past, sometime that's like further away. Whereas like the faster rotating disk is indicating that maybe it's a song that you listened to relatively recently. So again, it doesn't play the song yet. It's just giving you an opportunity to kind of reflect on when in the past that might be kind of drawing from before you might decide to engage with it. So basically the way that OLLI works is that it will make a little over 200 total rotations. And if you decide to not select to listen to the song, it'll just abandon the song and eventually it will select another one in the future. So it works totally randomly. And the algorithm that we designed, it surfaces about almost like 9 songs per week. So you can't control it. You don't know what song will be selected, but you can trust it will kind of indefinitely do this behavior over time. And so one of the interesting things is that the entire archive or the database of your listening histories is tied to today's date. So a song that OLLI selected that was a song that you listened to last week, in like 5 years, that will be a much slower rotation. In 10 years, it'll be even slower. And so in a way, it represents a way that your data can kind of age with you over time. Okay, so that's a lot of information about how OLLI works before you even listen to the song. So if you do decide that you would like to listen to the song, all you have to do is kind of subtly, tangibly manipulate the rotating disc, and it will play the song for you pretty much instantaneously. So here you can see a quick video example of it's already rotating relatively slowly. The user sees this.
Lord, don't leave me all by myself. Lord, don't leave me.
Right, and so it will continue to play out the song like rotating, and then once the song is finished, it will just kind of stop and go to a passive state. And that will be that. And a few last kind of design details before I conclude that I just want to point out with this project is that we designed OLLI to work in any kind of orientation. So here you can see it lying down. In the video that we just watched, OLLI was in a different orientation. And so this rotating disc is kind of mirrored on both sides. And this teardrop form factor allowed us to create something that could kind of fit into different people's like spaces over time. And say, for example, if you wanted to like move from one place to another or hand it down to another person. And so really thinking about not only like a human relation to this thing, but also like non-human relations or environmental relations or how it might relate to other things over time, which is really an important quality when we think about things that we have in our life over a long period of time. We've put a lot of care and attention into creating it as this very long-lasting device that could kind of hold up over time. We prototyped and created 3 kind of what we call research product versions that could last and operate in people's lives for years. And we went ahead and put them into people's kind of lived environments for 15 months, so well over 1 year. And just kind of to better understand how they live with them and what their experiences were. And so again, the point here was not so much to ask them whether or not they liked it, but more to better understand how Ollie might have fit into their lives, how that might kind of change over time, where there were maybe moments of epiphany or reflection, but also if there were tensions that emerged. And so we found that this kind of like ongoing behavior, the fact that Ollie like always like works, even if you can't control it when it will select a song, but the fact that it always will eventually, it has this ongoing quality, and that kind of evolving change allowed it to have kind of its own time. So a time that was independent necessarily of like human experience, but that could kind of coexist or kind of co-work with humans and non-humans that it occupied with. And so it really kind of crafted the space for thinking not just about like interaction, because the interaction is very simple, but about experiences kind of prior to interaction, like pre-interaction, and also kind of post-interaction. So thinking about where interactivity could actually be quite reduced, but you could still create a space for forming a long-term relationship. And I'm going to just wrap up here, but just a couple different kind of provocations, just in conclusion, is that Ollie helps us kind of see, and kind of slow interaction maybe helps us see that maybe creating spaces to invite encounters where the person can choose whether or not they want to interact before the true experience is revealed could be quite powerful for forming long-term relationships and also for supporting experiences of reflection. So inviting encounters rather than demanding attention. Also, interaction design and design research really needs to kind of move ahead and thinking about how we design for evolving and emergent qualities. So the idea with Ollie that, you know, at first, you may not be able to read or understand the relative speed that it's turning at, but maybe over time you start to have a better idea of thinking back when that song might be coming from in your past before you decide to engage with it. And finally, the last point that I wanted to talk about is this idea of actually thinking about how we might need to move beyond designing just for interaction, but designing for something that's maybe much like bigger than that, and thinking about a longer term temporal kind of scale that we might relate to things where interactivity is important, but also all the relations that the artifacts that we create have to other non-humans within the environment could also be, you know, equally or maybe even more important when we think about supporting long-term relationships and thinking about how we might co-inhabitate with the things that we make and that are a part of our lives. So thank you very much, and I'm really looking forward to moving on to the panel discussion.
Yeah, thanks. Very good, beautiful design. Especially, I like the pacing quality of the Ollie radio, and also I think Tak is good at music, so maybe Tak can comment and have dialogue later. So now, well, maybe I change share my screen. Okay, now we go to the questions, and I invite all researchers here to give us some comments on this question. So now first question is, what types of qualitative experience are you most interested? And what makes you think they are unique? First, I will invite Tak to answer these questions, and then next go to Meijin and Will. So Tak, go ahead.
Thank you, Roy. when I was thinking about the questions, for this one, I think I mentioned it in my presentation, is that I'm much more interested in not the fun and enjoyable kind of experiences. I'm interested in more deeper, richer, and personally meaningful experiences, and that would involve things like, you know, the other panel members have talked about self-reflection, and relationship of self and others, relationship between self and the larger world. I think my attitude has shifted over the years, particularly recently, given the desperate situation I think the world is in at the moment. We have gone on too long ignoring the larger world in terms of environment, the species, flora and fauna. I think it's time that, for me, it's really important that we now think about how we can look at experiences between us and the larger world, in relation to the larger world, and finding ways in which we can make that connection more clear, and more cogent, you know, so that we live and cohabitate, not just with other people, but also with the world. And I think that's not unique. I think a lot of my colleagues are now in interaction design and HCI are moving towards activism and moving towards trying to do something about this. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, Meijin?
Yeah, so I think what Hua just said was very beautiful. Well, my reflection on this question is that I think the types of qualitative experience that I'm interested in exploring is that kind of experience of sharing our cognitive loads, for example, in the process of decision-making, and also collaborate with the machines or devices in general. So for example, your navigator may give you suggestions about which route to take based on the traffic condition, the weather, or your own preference. And I think, well, this is unique, is right now we're living in a time where we have to constantly work with machines. Also, another issue that I have been thinking about is how this individual experience can also, or should the individual experience influence the system as a whole. For example, each group would have its own preferences. And if the system can automatically adapt to that particular preference of a group, it can probably create a unique experience for a particular group, if not for a particular person, because we're still living in a world where we have to consider a lot of physical limitations or what is good for most people in a system, not just for the individual. So I think that's the qualitative experience that I'm interested in. Like, how do we live peacefully, harmoniously with the devices and the machines? Thank you.
Yeah, I like the adaptive quality of the machine you mentioned. And also, I think in the near future, we will interact with the interactive machine more and more. So yeah, that's very meaningful. So how about Will?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, that's a great question, and I really appreciate both responses. I think that, like, for myself and within our research group, one of the things that we're really interested in is people's kind of relation to things, and also other non-human entities over time. There's, you know, for various reasons, there's so much design research and human-computer interaction research where you know, there might be like a quick kind of domain topic that's investigated and then like moved on, or, you know, like people's understanding of how they might relate to a particular, maybe like new kind of technology in their life might be quite like limited to, you know, maybe like a lab session or a few weeks. And so one of the commitments that we've often made is to really investigate and to take seriously how new things might fit within people's lives and situate within them over much longer periods of time, and kind of what that means, and how do we design for human technology relations that maybe will be able to kind of persist. And so when looking into those kinds of experiences, one of the things that has been revealed to us that's quite important is that, utility is obviously like important, the functionality of something, the kind of the prescribed kind of purpose that might have within your life, but that can't be the only kind of experiential kind of quality or design quality that we strive for, because we know that like when something becomes kind of involved within your life and kind of taken up, and there is like a certain kind of becoming that you have with it, it goes beyond just simply like what it can kind of functionally do for you. And so, that raises really kind of complex questions for design, and especially for the kind of form givers of technology that, with interaction designers, because, how do we create things that might have like a longer term presence and that might be able to kind of form a type of kind of relation or a kind of a mediating quality that's beyond just functionality. And so these are the kind of experiences that we're interested in. And I think that connects well to some of the themes of the panel, which is this kind of dichotomy or this relationship between like human-centered design and I think as it was posed like non-human-centered design or something other than just that. And I think that maybe even connects also with some of the points that Tuck was making around the notion that we need to think of design practice not as something that just exists in isolation or there's like the technology and the human. We have to think much more kind of holistically and critically about how we create things, their consequences, and how they might persist in the world, and the effects they'll have. And so these are the kinds of experiences that we're interested in critically investigating.
Yeah, great. So Tab, would you respond to Will? Especially, I think you are more interested in serendipity and synchronicity about interaction. I think it's very similar to what Will has done with slow interaction, and maybe the temporality is very important in qualitative experience. So, would you respond?
Yeah, I mean, when I saw Will's work on Ollie and publications around Ollie, it does have an incredibly strong resonance with the work I did in my PhD, which is around kind of understanding serendipity through shuffle listening. And Will and I actually went through Microsoft research in the UK, in Cambridge, and we worked with the same people. And funny enough, at the end of my work, I also grappled with the same kind of issues that Will was talking about. And I didn't create an Ollie, but I created a photo system where it mined the historicity of photos and try and present photos in a very automatic kind of way to people to hopefully trigger that kind of sense of serendipity, or to not trigger, but so much to nudge, to encourage that to happen when people engage with media of personal significance and media that has a lot of memories that are associated with that. So I think in response to Will's what Will just said also, I think that slow technology idea is very important too, because a lot of our world is so disposable and things are created in such a cheap kind of way that we are encouraged to just keep buying new things instead of continuing with something that we have. And that's such a short shelf life for stuff, and that's not going to be good for the environment. In terms of serendipity, I just finally to say, I think we also need to aim for some magic in life, some enchantment, moments in which we connect with kind of the more existential aspect of life, not just a pure functional, hedonic, enjoying, parts of our living, but occasionally be encountering something that has a deeper meaning to ourselves, that stops us and makes us think and makes us wonder and makes us realize that there's something bigger than just us.
Yeah, thanks. I think Will mentioned a very good point that before and after interaction, we have something to do to make the interaction meaningful and better. So also, I think Mei Jun's work about how to use the adaptive system to arrange all the interaction. So that's great. So let's go to the next question. What are the most viable and common research methodologies and methods to investigate this experience? So maybe Meijun can introduce more about participatory design, and also I know Tak, you are good at participatory design, and also maybe we can have a dialogue here. So Tak first.
Oh, okay. I thought it was Meijun first, but it's okay.
Okay. But Meijun, okay, Meijun.
Oh, okay, sure, definitely. My answer to this question is kind of short. I think there's simply no single research method that can investigate all experiences of interest.
Yeah,
I
agreed.
use mixed methods, which means I use both qualitative and quantitative methods. And nowadays we talk about big data a lot, but I think we should also pay attention to thick data. So traditional methods such as ethnographic research are still very useful. And we can think about using smart craft to collect data about user experience. And that data can possibly be analyzed by AI or other kinds of algorithms and fit back to the system in real time to improve user experience. Thank you.
Great. Tak?
Yeah, I totally agree with Meijun. I think, we select methodologies and methods based on what we're trying to understand and who with, right? So it depends on the community and also on the phenomenon that we're interested in. And so while I have been primarily working with qualitative methods, using kind of very thick ways to kind of get thick data and narratives, getting people to talk and to reflect, and nudging people to think about the experiences in different ways. So like through probes and through kind of evocative objects and evocative activities. I think that's also very, there's a lot of promise in terms of the quantitative data that we have as well, because a lot of our everyday activities and our interactions with technologies are captured, whether we want it or not. And I think there have been work in which I've done in which we kind of mine both and put them together and looked at those quantitative and qualitative data together to provide an even richer picture of what's happening. So I think, yeah, that would be my response.
Yeah, great, thank you. So Will, we are also very curious about your methodology. So please.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, I think I gave it away a little bit within the presentation. Definitely research through design, but that is also a diverse set of kind of commitments and practices, certainly. So for us, I mean, like one of the kind of more studio-based approaches that we adopt is really a designer researcher approach. Sometimes we just like also acknowledging kind of positionality and where we're coming from. Sometimes we have to start. Sometimes just we have to dig where we stand. So we often use our own kind of data and experiences in building and kind of prototyping systems and creating them as a way of to ask questions of what if is this right? Is the pacing of this thing right? Is it even right to have this thing exist in the world? And we often kind of progressively build up from there. I mean, another important part then is connecting it certainly with studies that are kind of situated. We're really interested in making things, but then kind of putting them out into the world. Again, not to better understand, whether or not people might like them or to kind of evaluate their kind of market potential, but to ask new questions and to invite participation in questioning whether, are the things that we're making and the commitments and values that are bound up in them, is that a part, could or kind of should that be a part of the future? I think that, kind of built, we're talking about research methodologies, but we can also talk about, what do they do in terms of design? And for us, one of our biggest commitments is thinking about how do we use design as a form of inquiry and practice that generates new problems, doesn't just necessarily solve the problems of now or, the kind of low-hanging fruit, but how do we use design to raise new questions, generate new problems, and generate new perspectives on how we might kind of see and understand our world? And that can't be exclusive. We have to be participatory in that. And I think participatory design is a great approach. co-design, but also kind of making things have people's like lived experiences with them. And I think increasingly one of the things that at least coming from my lived experience in a Canadian context, I think it will be very important to continue to investigate kind of decolonizing and methodologies and kind of indigenous ways of knowing as well, which is very much an important part of kind of lived experience here within Canada, and it sounds like in Tut's context too, and obviously more broadly as well.
Great. Nevertheless, please continue making beautiful artifact. We love your design very much. So due to the time limitation, let's go to maybe the third and fourth question. So what is your view on human-centered design versus non-human-centered design? I think Will has mentioned this. So will you first go, Will?
Sure. I mean, I think that on a higher level, I think that this is a really, really important question to kind of bring up, in that we know that human-centered design has created a world that has pretty much done nothing more than violence and destruction in terms of how we think about our entire kind of ecological system. And so what we know we need a design practice that has to be beyond human-centered design. We are living in the age of the Anthropocene. There is no choice. The consequences are so ripe and have been for so long. We have to do something differently. The question is, what do we do differently? Where do we situate that? And maybe one of the answers is that we need a diversity of practices that are, you know, localized, but that we have like knowledge exchange, and that design can grow. But also, you know, it's like within designers, we think about things through exemplars, you know, the things that we make, and those things can be services and systems. They don't have to be physical artifacts, but the things that we make, you know, that's also like the language of design. So we need to kind of design like kind of portfolios of practice that kind of move beyond a human-centered approach. And maybe, and it's also like the design philosopher and my former colleague Tony Fry would say, you know, you have to also dig where you stand. Like, how can you engage with like this very complex kind of issue of moving beyond human-centered design, but also doing it in your own way. And for us within our lab and studio, we just look at like interactivity. I mean, interaction design is so often looked at interactivity as just a brief dialogue between a system and a person, and it kind of ends there. But we know that we have to think about other relations kind of beyond that, and within that brings up the longer forms of time.
Yeah, thank you. So Todd?
That's wonderful. Thanks, Will, for introducing the word for me, which I think in terms of human-centered design and non-human-centered, I don't think that's useful to have a binary between one or the other. I totally agree with Will about having to go beyond human-centered design, which means Will has touched on the local. I want to use the word micro and also macro. I think that's really interesting way to look at very micro and situated situations where we design for the local. And then we also need to look at the macro, where we look at what are the different consequences beyond just the human, and that has other consequences. For me, increasingly, and that's why I made that bio to talk a bit about my other experiences. I think we need to really work with other disciplines. For me personally, I want to work with zoologists. I want to work with biologists. I want to work with environmentalists. I want to work with activists. That's where I think we need to go on one very macro level to better understand how things affect the different spaces and domains, and finding the vocabulary to be able to work with them. And so I think that's collaborative, co-designing, participatory approach is going to work best when we work with so many different disciplines. Okay. And yeah, I think that's where we need to go. Well, I would definitely want to go towards that direction.
Yeah, interesting. So Meijun, would you respond to non-human-centered design or beyond human-centered design?
Yeah, thank you for the opinions of this proposition, having a beyond human-centered design. However, I think whether we like it or not, human-centered design will still be the core of HCI research.
Sure.
However, I think hybrid design can provide another perspective. It means that we can think about designing for a hybrid agent to include the material world and not just for the human. For example, we can design a service system for a car and its driver as a whole, and not just for the driver or the passenger. This way, it encourages us to think about the design system and not just a design object, because in some cases, the human and artifacts are partners who act together. Therefore, the quality of the information that's provided by the artifact, including, for example, the right amount of information, the right timing, and the right way to deliver the message, would profoundly influence our experience of engaging the world. So that's my perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Okay, we have four minutes. So please answer the question, what are your recommendations for HCI and design beginners? Because many listeners or audience today in Taiwan, they want to learn more about HCI design to start learning and researching through this type or any types of experience. So first we go to Tak. Would you give us some recommendation?
I think based on what
kind of
saying,
student you want, we send student to you.
That's a good question. I would want a student who has broad experiences.
Okay.
I don't necessarily just want a student who just completed only a computing degree. I think a really successful student in human-computer interaction today would need to be someone who has broader life experiences and who has interests beyond just computing, interest in humanities, interest in science, interest in the world, and politics. I think that's really important to be able to have that broader interest and understanding of the world and be able to see things from a multi-perspective. That to me would be a much more successful and exciting student to work with. Not just very good at computing, which is important, but have that broader background. Yeah.
That's very rare. So, will you answer this question first?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. I really love this question. And so, yeah, I think that like what Tak mentioned in terms of like, you know, interdisciplinarity, or maybe even underlying that, it's just like curiosity beyond maybe like a single discipline is certainly important. But for me, it's really like, I think that one of the best recommendations I could give you is to not be afraid to design. We have to design to know. We have to make things as a form of inquiry to kind of, and through that processing, trusting and engaging that process is so important. And what's bound up in that too is understanding your positionality, your values, and your commitments in relation to doing design. So often it's the case that I find like students want to kind of almost like get all the right information if they've done enough research and secondary and primary research, and once they'll get the saturation point and then they can start to design. But no, it's like you can do all that stuff, but you need to do that in relation and in tandem and in parallel to doing design work. So you need to treat it as an epistemology, is the way that we know is through the making of things. And again, those can be immaterial things. It doesn't have to be physical artifacts, but it's a complete mindset, and it's an approach. It's understanding your positionality, your values, and your commitments, and channeling that into the research questions through making.
Yeah, good, great. So, Meijin?
Yeah, I also think this is a great question. I think one recommendation that I have for the HCI design beginners is to view humans and machines as partners and think about the possibilities of different forms of human-machine interactions. For example, what functions, indicators, or operations are more suitable in a digital form, and what others are better implemented as tangible interface. Different interface will definitely bring different types of experiences. For example, the concept of embodiment is actually a form of interaction between your body and an artifact. So this kind of experience is visceral. Your body makes decision by itself. So experience like this is very difficult to be replaced by a digital interface. When you interact with a screen, your senses are relatively limited compared to using your whole body to interact with an artifact, such as riding a bicycle. So my recommendation is that you can learn to research on different types of experiences, try to explore possibilities of different types of interface, and to justify the use of interface in a digital or analog formats.
Thank you. Great. Okay, this session is the full circle, the third session of the Taiwan Kai Cross DIS and other important international conference. So we come to a full circle and think three many good, very good researcher here. And so every speaker here, 10 seconds conclusion, please. Attack. Very short.
10 seconds.
Or 20 seconds.
I think I'm just repeating
encouraging.
myself. I think we need to think more about our existence and how we exist with our world if we want to continue to design and continue to live in this world. For future
that's
generations.
very important. Okay. Well,
my quick conclusion would be design has to change. Design researchers have the real positionality to lead that change and to be transformative. The next generation is probably many of the students that are watching this right now, and it's so important to form these international connections and come visit us in Vancouver. Thank you.
great, very meaningful. And Majin?
Yeah, my conclusion would be as a designer or a design researcher, we have to think about how to build partnerships between the users and the artifact and the material world so that we can have a better environment for all of us. Thank you.
Yeah, great. I would thank you three again and your time and your effort for this session and also our audience in Taiwan. So thank you and have a nice day or nice evening. Thank you. Bye.